Hi viewers, I am Dr. Jayakar Bandariam, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Botany, Government First Grade College, Car Street, Mangalore. The topic I have chosen for today's discussion is ethnobotany. Hope many of you have heard this word ethnobotany, which is a very interesting and emerging interdisciplinary branch of botany. Though the research activities in ethnobotany is several decades old, both in India as well as abroad, the academic interest on this topic is comparatively new. This is because not many Indian universities have included ethnobotany as a topic in their syllabi. But fortunately, the Mangalore University has included ethnobotany as a topic in the economic botany module of its sixth semester botany syllabus for BSc program. Therefore, I will be explaining now the basics of what is ethnobotany, what are its diverse objectives, the historical background of ethnobotany, the methods of doing research in ethnobotany, the important contributions of ethnobotany, and the status of ethnobotany in India and Karnataka. Let me start my discussion with a very interesting example. This is a very popular plant in the Indian traditional medicine. All of you might have heard about this plant. This is called Rauwolfia serpentina, popular as Sarpagandha or Patala Garuda. The common English name is Indian snake root. And this plant is commonly used in the Indian traditional medicine for the treatment of mental disorders, snake bites, digestive disorders, etc. You'll be surprised to know that this is commonly called Pagal ki Dawa in the folk medicine of India and is commonly sold in the local medicinal markets, herbal markets, especially in northern Indian states. Attracted by the popularity of this plant in local medicinal practices, researchers or scientists of some of the Western pharmaceutical companies decided to study the medicinal activity of this plant, and finally a alkaloid by name reserpine was extracted from the roots of this plant, and this reserpine was found to be very effective in reducing high blood pressure. As a result, reserpine became a drug of choice for reducing blood pressure, or it was very popularly used as a anti-hypertensive medicine. Let me give you another example. Now, the plant which is seen on the screen is a very popular medicinal plant. It is also a popular garden plant rather. It's commonly called Nitya Pushpa or Sada Pushpa. Botanical name is Catharanthus roseus, belongs to Epocynaceae. The common English name is Madagascar periwinkle. Besides being a very popular garden plant, this plant is also popularly used in the traditional medicinal systems of some of the countries like India, Jamaica, Philippines, etc. It's mainly used in the treatment of diabetes. Again, because of its popularity in the local medicinal systems, scientists working on medicinal plants were attracted towards this plant. They started studying the medicinal activities of this plant. Their interest was to find out a medicine for diabetes, which can be used as an alternative for insulin. But surprisingly, instead of an anti-diabetic medicine, leaves of this plant had several alkaloids, out of which two could be used in the treatment of cancers. You might have heard of these two alkaloids, vincristine and vinblastine. Now they are the drug of choice in the treatment of certain types of cancers. And these two are extracted from the leaves of this garden plant or medicinal plant called Madagascar berry. Now there can be several such examples wherein the plants which are used in traditional medicine have delivered some of the important medicines to the modern systems of treatment or allopathic medicine. To give you a few popular examples, there is a medicine called Digitalin, which is extracted from Digitalis purpurea, which is a cardiac medicine used in the treatment of heart disorders. There is morphine from opium poppy, then quinine. Again, when I say quinine, of late in the COVID-19 infected world, quinine has again become a very popular medicine. You might have heard of countries requesting for the supply of hydroxyquinine from India. Now, quinine was originally used in the treatment of malarial fevers, and it is obtained from the bark of a tree which is called Cinchona bark tree, or botanically called Cinchona officinalis. Like that, there is another anti-cancerous compound called Taxol, extracted from Taxus baccata. So I can go on giving several such examples wherein a traditionally popular medicinal plant has yielded a very highly effective alkaloid or a medicine which has become very popular in the Western systems of medicine or the allopathic medicine. Now let us discuss deeply into the aspects of how these drugs were actually discovered. Now to generalize, in all these examples, the lead or the clue about the medicinal property of the plant was actually given by indigenous people or local knowledgeable elders or herbal practitioners who were practicing local or traditional medicine. What I mean to say is, the scientists or researchers, they shortlisted these plants for research based on their popularity in the local or traditional medicine. Now, when analyzed or verified by the modern science using the sophisticated instruments and other facilities, the drugs were discovered. Now, this kind of a drug discovery or research of medicine based on the reputation of a plant in the local medicinal practices, folk medicinal practices, or traditional medicinal practices like Siddha, Unani, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, etc., is called as ethnopharmacology or ethnopharmacological method of drug discovery. Now, I am dealing in detail about this ethnopharmacology because this is a branch of a larger discipline of science which is called ethnobotany, and this ethnobotany is the topic of our discussion for today. Now let's come, what is ethnobotany? To define, ethnobotany is the study of the relationship between plants and indigenous people or cultures. So here, researchers or academicians, they are interested to study the relationship existing between plants and the local people or traditional people or the indigenous people, with the interest of studying how the local people use or how they perceive the plants in their surroundings. To be more precise, ethnobotany is the study of how people of a particular culture or region make use of plants in their surroundings. Now, the origin of this term, ethnobotany, is from two words, that is ethno, which refers to study of people. You might have heard of the term ethnology. So So ethno refers to study of people, and of course botany, which is the study of plants. So simply saying, ethnobotany is the study of traditional botany. It is the study of plant uses, plant understanding, plant perceptions of the local people. Now, going into the history of ethnobotany, aspects of local plants. So Harshvarjar coined the term ethnobotany to include studies of uses of plants by the local or primitive or aboriginal people. Now this leads us to another word. What do you mean by this indigenous people or culture? Now to put it in simple words, people living for a long period of time in a particular area and adapted to the locality, there are called as indigenous people. Now this word indigenous comes from the Latin word indigena, which means native or long adapted to an area. So here you can make out the photographs of some of the indigenous peoples of coastal Karnataka. Now, since they live very close to nature, they develop a very deeper and thorough understanding of the biological components around them, including plants and animals. So their culture is very closely related to the local plants and local animals, and also the local other ecosystem components. So this is how some of the plant products are used in the local cultures. See, wild plants are used for construction materials. You can make out this house, which is built entirely from herbal resources or plant resources. Of course, herbal medicine, a very important way of using plants by the local people. Now you can see the household materials like baskets, containers, etc. They are also prepared from plant products. Now food, of course, very important use of plants. Many of the local people, they rely heavily on the wild plants as their sources of food. So ultimately, it could be said that the local traditional cultures are heavily dependent on wild plants as the source of many of their daily needs. Now this gentleman, Richard Ivan Schultes, he is regarded as the father of ethnobotany because the credit of popularizing ethnobotany as an academic discipline, as a research discipline, goes to Richard Ivan Schultes. He has conducted studies on the medicinal uses of plants, the beliefs of plants, and other uses of plants by the traditional cultures of Amazonian rainforest. He spent whole of his life doing ethnobotany in the Amazonian forest. Because of this effort of Schultes, he has been regarded as the father of ethnobotany, international ethnobotany. Now coming to ethnobotany in India, the credit of introducing ethnobotany in India or conducting pioneering studies in ethnobotany goes to Dr. E.K. Janaki Ammal. This is one name which every student of botany should know. Dr. E.K. Janaki Ammal has got the credit of heading the then Botanical Survey of India, of independent India. She was invited to reorganize and head the Botanical Survey of India after India obtained its independence. She started ethnobotany in India, but the credit of popularizing ethnobotany of India goes to Dr. S.K. Jain. So Dr. S.K. Jain is actually regarded as the father of Indian ethnobotany. Now, after knowing what is ethnobotany and some very important milestones in the history of ethnobotany, let's try to understand what are the objectives of ethnobotanical studies or ethnobotanical research. Now, the major focus of ethnobotany is studying traditional medicinal plants and practices so that they can deliver many of the drugs to cure important diseases of the modern world. But ethnobotany does not restrict itself only to the study of medicinal plants and practices. It also studies the methods of traditional nomenclature. When I say nomenclature, local people do have their own system of naming plants. See, for example, in botany, we follow the binomial system of nomenclature, wherein a botanical name has got two parts, a genus name to begin with and a species name. Same way, traditional people also have their own system of naming and classifying plants in their surroundings. Now, this is called as folk nomenclature and folk classification. So in ethnobotany, people are interested to study how local people name plants in their surroundings, how they classify plants, etc. Then traditional systems of agriculture, traditional cuisines, edible plants, plants in our material culture, how plants are used to fulfill the daily demands of a rural life. For example, as we have seen, plants are used in the making of baskets, mats, and other containers, etc. So plants in material culture. And very importantly, traditional conservation practices. Now, today we know that there is organized effort to conserve plants and animals, biodiversity, by declaring a place as national park, wildlife sanctuary, reserve forest, etc. But if you go back to the history of civilization, many of the traditional cultures do have their own systems of plant and animal conservation. Especially, they regard plants and animals as sacred elements. And because of this belief, many of the plants and animals are conserved. Now, this is called as a traditional conservation practice. For example, the practice of conserving pieces of forest as a sacred groves or banas. Now, this is an example for a traditional conservation practice, or worshipping ficus trees by planting them in front of temples or worship places. Conservation, worshipping tulsi. It is another example of conservation of a plant. So, study of traditional conservation practices is another very important objective of ethnobotany. Ethnobotany also aims to study the various religious beliefs, taboos, and religious practices around plants. So, as you can make out, the objectives of ethnobotany is very wide and diverse. But the major focus is on the study of medicinal plants because this has got commercial and economic importance. As I said, the local medicinal plants or traditional medicinal plants may result in the delivery of important herbal drugs into the modern world. So that is the major focus of studying ethnobotany nowadays. You can make out some of the ethnocultural practices of local people, how they use local plants for the making of things like basket. Now, this is mat weaving. This is also basket weaving, etc. Now, this is how local plants are used to fulfill the daily needs of local cultures. This is one aspect of ethnobotany. Now, how do we study ethnobotany, or what are the methods available to study ethnobotany? See, the most popular method is conducting interviews and fieldwork with the local traditional people or local cultures or local communities. If you want to study ethnobotany of an area, you go to that area, you identify some elderly people who have a lot of knowledge about the local plants. So you go to forest with them, you conduct field studies with them, you conduct interviews with them, record their knowledge, then go for a scientific analysis. That is how ethnobotany is conducted. Now, in addition to that, ethnobotany could be also studied with the help of fossils and archaeological sources by analyzing the oral traditions, that is the songs, proverbs, and other oral literatures of the language. Scrutiny of herbarium records. See, some of the herbarium sheets the uses of plants have been recorded. So one can just go to a herbarium, study those herbarium sheets, and compile the uses recorded in those herbarium sheets. That itself will become an ethnobotanical study. And another important way of doing ethnobotanical research is conducting surveys in the local markets. If you go to any local rural market, many elderly people or local healers, they'll be selling medicinal plants in the market. So you just talk to them, find out the diversity of plants sold, and also try to gather information regarding the uses of these plants, etc. So that also becomes an ethnobotanical study. So these are the various methods by which an ethnobotanical study can be conducted. So methods of ethnobotany. Now, the next question is, what is the importance of ethnobotany? Why should we study ethnobotany? The very important use of ethnobotany is, as we have studied with the help of several examples so far, ethnobotany will yield many useful products to modern society like herbal medicines. Secondly, ethnobotanical studies also reveal sustainable resource utilization and harvest methods which are used by local people. See, local people, they use plants and animals in a very sustainable way. They do not just squander them, they do not use them without any control, without any regulation. They have their own method of controlled exploitation or sustainable exploitation. So studies of ethnobotany could give information regarding how local communities sustainably utilize the resources in their surroundings. And as I said, ethnobotany will also give us insights, information regarding conservation of local plants and animals. Or we may think of following the traditional conservation practices such as sacred groves, sacred plants, etc. And by strengthening them, we can strengthen our modern methods of biodiversity, environmental conservation. Now coming to the Indian potential of ethnobotany, as we all know, India is a country which is very rich in biodiversity and also ethnological diversity. So we are a country with ethnic and cultural diversity. So there are more than 500 tribal groups in India. Our botanical diversity is very high. We also have a very rich repository of biocultural heritage. Because of all this, I repeat, because of the rich ethnic diversity, cultural diversity, and the botanical diversity, India is a very fertile ground for carrying out any type of ethnobotanical research. Now coming to the ethnobotanical studies conducted in Karnataka, it can be said that ethnobotanical studies, organized studies I'm talking about, started in around 1990, and serious studies have been taken up only after 1995. And if you look for literature, about say 50 or more research reports have been available from the different places of Karnataka, like coastal Karnataka, Shivamogga, Belagavi, etc. But these studies mainly concentrate on the ethno-medicinal practices and their scientific analysis. Of course, these are about the modern approaches. Now, earlier only qualitative descriptions were used, like ethnobotany was confined to reporting only the uses of plants by certain tribal groups or indigenous groups. But now, these information were analyzed with the help of statistical methods. Now, this is called as quantitative ethnobotany. The information collected in the field should be validated with the help of appropriate statistical tools and techniques. That is called quantitative ethnobotany. So from qualitative ethnobotany, now we have moved towards quantitative ethnobotany. Now, a new emerging area in ethnobotany is called applied ethnobotany. That is, applying the ethnobotanical information for the most important aspects of modern world like conservation of biodiversity, sustainable development, then sustainable exploitation of resources, etc. Now, this area wherein you apply the old concepts into modern world. Now, this is called as applied ethnobotany, which is gaining importance nowadays. Now, as I said, there is a lot of opportunities and challenges in the area of ethnobotany. One very good opportunity for young researchers in the area of ethnobotany is because now to carry out ethnobotanical studies, sophisticated laboratory facilities are not required. Nature itself is our laboratory. So just by going to the nature and studying plants in the company of local knowledgeable elders, we can make wonderful ethnobotanical studies. So ethnobotany could be carried out with cheaper facilities, but we can bring out very valuable information. There is also a lot of emergency to carry out ethnobotanical studies because the biodiversity and cultural diversity of the world is fast decreasing. Now, if all the biodiversity and the cultural diversity gets reduced, then there won't be much scope to do any ethnobotany. So there is an urgency to document the ethnobotanical information. One other significance is that, as I said, ethnobotanical information provides clues for bioprospecting. Bioprospecting is looking for commercial products from biological resources like medicines, nutritive supplements, etc. So this is some basic information regarding what is ethnobotany, what is the importance of ethnobotany, what is the historical development in the area of ethnobotany, how we can conduct ethnobotanical studies, what are the significant contributions of ethnobotany so far, and what are the opportunities and the challenges in the area of ethnobotany. Hope you have enjoyed watching this video and have benefited from its contents. Please subscribe to JB's Bio class and continue watching my video classes. Thank you.